Once again, our Duke basketball end-of-year review series continues here on Locked On Blue Devils today. What about some transfers that have made a big impact for Jon Scheyer and Duke this past season? We're going to talk about Ryan Young and Jacob Grandison. That conversation comes up today on Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Hope that you're doing well as we're going to continue our end-of-year review series on today's show. We'll talk about a couple of transfers this past year for Duke basketball and Ryan Young and Jacob Grandison. My buddy Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast will be with me to co-pilot our episode here today. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available each and every day. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review, as your support for Locked On Blue Devils means the absolute world to us. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at @LO_Blue Devils. I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Without further ado, let me bring on my good pal Josh Cox, who joins us here on the program today. And Josh, here we are in the month of May, and we're always able to find ways to kind of look back at this Duke basketball season.
Well, yeah, and a season that was, impacted by these transfers, and in positive ways. And so, obviously, it's kind of something new to Duke basketball. Over the years, have not taken many transfers. We can count them pretty much. But now it's the new wave of college athletics. And so, yeah, Jacob and Ryan both had good seasons. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, got to come over to Duke and be a part of an ACC tournament championship winning team. I mean, both these guys had experience elsewhere in the college basketball world. At the conclusion of the show today, we'll talk about a couple of the transfers that have made an impact for Duke over the last decade or so. But it's got to be something from the outside, knowing the Duke basketball brand. I mean, if you're in college basketball, you're well aware of what Duke is, and then getting to transfer and be a part of it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and both of those guys, played at a high level, previously in the Big Ten to Duke, but there's just something different about that. There is a step from, definitely a step from Northwestern to Duke, and a step from Illinois as well. I mean, those are both reputable schools. We love Chris Collins and what he's doing at Northwestern. But at the end of the day, there's just something different about the Duke brand and what it feels like to play in Cameron, for all your home games and whatnot. So, yeah, for sure. While they came from solid D1 programs, this was definitely something new for them.
Both coming from the Big Ten and now playing for the Duke Blue Devils. We'll start with Jacob Grandison, who Duke was his third college team that he was a part of, as Grandison, of course, started at Holy Cross, then transferred to Illinois, playing in the Big Ten, and then ultimately was able to come over and transfer for Duke. When you think about Jacob Grandison's season, big picture, kind of what is your big takeaway?
I think he was very helpful in some games. I honestly was expecting a tad bit of a different vibe from him, coming into the season. If you looked at his numbers from Illinois and kind of the way they used him, I was expecting him to be a little bit more of a defensive stopper. And then, his numbers from three were down a little bit from Illinois. But all that to say, he was a veteran voice, and you could tell that he had earned the respect of his teammates very quickly. And anytime you have a roster full of, 18, 19-year-olds, it's always good to have a 22 or 23-year-old in that locker room. And, and I felt like he did well for being a transfer. Obviously their leadership or influence is limited because of the length of time. But I believe he did well there. And like I said, there were a couple of moments this season where had it not been for Jacob Grandison, we've got a couple of more losses on our schedule.
Yeah, stepped up big time for Duke this year. We talked a good bit about some of the injuries that bothered Duke throughout the season. Credit to Grandison playing in all 36 games for Duke. The corner 3-point percentage is something that we were absolutely raving about with what he was able to do in college basketball. But in totality, as you mentioned, shooting 33% from 3-point range, I think we were expecting a little bit more pop. But also there were times where, to back up Jacob Grandison here a little bit, Josh, when he was on the floor, he wasn't necessarily emphasized on the offensive end, right?
Right.
Sure, he passed up a couple of shots from time to time, but there were also opportunities where Duke could have gotten his shot going, and for whatever reason, the ball just didn't end up in his hands.
Yeah, I mean, he shot 41% from three the previous season at Illinois with higher usage. You know what I mean? So, he was playing more minutes, getting more shots, shooting the ball better. So I don't know if it was just the role he had to take on. He wasn't a focal point of the offense. We know that. And he just didn't get his shots, man. At the end of the day, that's all there is to it. I mean, there were several times I can remember vividly where, he had the ball in his hands with under 5 seconds to go on the shot clock. And that's not ideal Jacob Grandison territory, So you're right. I'm not sure that we put him in the best situation for him to score points.
So we'll see, obviously, looking back on the year that was, no more college eligibility for Jacob Grandison. Certainly happy that he was able to be a part of the Brotherhood, able to be a part of an ACC tournament championship winning team. And like you said, was asked to do certain things. There are games this season that Duke does not win if Grandison is not on the floor. So credit to him for what he was able to do.
Yeah, and let's not overlook the fact that he's going to leave here with graduate credit of Duke University. We kind of overlook that sometimes, but I know he's still around, finishing up his studies. And I mean, I believe Jacob probably has, if he wants it, he probably has some overseas,
no doubt,
potential. But you know what? Some guys want to do that, and some guys don't want to do that. Moving overseas is a major step, especially. I don't know his relationship status and things like that. There's a lot that could go into that, right? So it'll be interesting to see where Jacob lands, if he lands in the basketball world, or he seems to be a brilliant guy and he may land elsewhere.
Let's continue talking about these end-of-year reviews for transfers on Duke basketball. Ryan Young made an impact this year for the Blue Devils, and we'll have that conversation after our first time out here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. This is, I got to say it, America's best tasting protein bar that you're going to find out there. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need to be trying Built Bar. It's healthy and tastes amazing. And the best part, these bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Go try out my favorite flavor, cookies and cream. And they're now available at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, while you can still get those specialty flavors online at Built.com. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, and coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab their 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff, churro puff, and so much more. Built Bar is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving forward here in today's episode, alongside my pal Josh Cox from Duke Football Talk's Section 17 podcast. Plug your podcast, if you will, Josh. What can people expect and where can they find it?
Yeah, absolutely. We just recorded last week or so our recap of spring practice and the spring game, the blue-white game. We take a deep dive into Duke football. We're going to bring you some content throughout this offseason with some interviews, looking to get athletic director Nina King back on, hopefully this summer. Got another interview coming up this coming week that we'll release next week. And so we try to bring you in-depth coverage of the Duke football program. Just even as we recorded this, about an hour before we recorded, we found out some transfer portal news and all these types of things. There's a lot of moving parts around the football program, Coach Elko and what he's doing there. And so we try to keep you as informed as possible. So you can find us anywhere you look for podcasts. Just search Section 17 podcast and we'll pop up, and we'd appreciate a follow. And if you enjoy the content and we earned it, like you would do for JJ here, 5-star ratings and reviews help us out. So we would appreciate it.
Make sure you go support them in the work that they're doing. They do great stuff there at the Section 17 podcast. So Josh, as we continue to move forward here on today's show, and we're looking at our end of year reviews for certain guys on the Duke basketball team, Ryan Young is another guy that transferred into Duke after some Big Ten experience, played at Northwestern for Brotherhood fella Chris Collins. They're the head coach there for the Wildcats, and Young transfers in. A big picture summation of what we saw from Young this season. What comes to mind for you?
Big picture is I believe that Derek Lively has a lot of his success. He has Ryan Young to thank for that as being a mentor. I believe Ryan Young had leadership abilities and skills, and then his on-the-court play, especially in the first 2 months of the season, it was very important because Lively was trying to get his feet under him. He was trying to come back from that injury. There was a lot going on. And when I think of Ryan Young, I think he was essential to what Duke did. And I love the fact that he's got an extra year of eligibility remaining.
Yeah, no, he gets to come back and play another year for Duke. And the fact that he was able to be there in the post with young bigs coming in, Lively, Filipowski, Mark Mitchell, bumping bodies down there, Christian Reeves even, who will make an impact for Duke in the years to come. I mean, I think that's we talked about just the presence and the maturity and so many of those other factors that don't necessarily relate to whether or not you're making shots or grabbing rebounds on the floor, but also to your point about Jacob Grandison, a couple of games this year not going in Duke's favor if Grandison's not out there. Josh, I think we can very much make the same case for Ryan Young this year.
Oh, probably in a greater way, just to be honest with you. Like I said, I'd say the first 2 months, maybe even 2.5 months, even until the middle of January, Ryan Young was a necessity on that court, and he's got such a unique game compared to today's college basketball player.
Right.
He really has that old school throwback game. He has great footwork down low. He uses pump fakes well. He's not very athletic. He dunked in the ACC tournament, and like the team was cracking up, and he doesn't get many of those. But I will say, we mentioned Grandison's numbers compared to his final season at Illinois. If you look at Ryan Young's numbers, he played similar number of minutes. He did not score as many points, okay? But obviously, he's not going to be asked to do that at Duke like he would have been more at Northwestern.
Right.
But I love the fact that like his actual shooting percentage, his free throw percentage greatly improved at Duke compared to what he was at Northwestern. And so, I don't know what that tells us about incoming grad transfers, because we had one that seemingly underperformed related to his previous season. We have another one that seemingly upped his game from the previous season. I was kind of hoping, to be honest with you, JJ, when I was researching for this episode, I was hoping there was a correlation somewhere where I could be like, hey, they do the same thing no matter where they're at. There isn't. But Ryan Young, I mean, we saw it even in the Duke Blue Planet or the videos after the game. His personality, the guy,
incredible personality. Yeah,
he's got a great voice, and he has this kind of funny humor side to him, humorous side to him as well. And so not only was Ryan Young, I believe, very important to last year's team, he's going to be very important to this year's team. We all know this, JJ. It's no secret that 5 spot right now is a question mark for Duke. There's some chatter about the transfer portal. There has been, and there still is. But at the end of the day, we could wind up with no one taking that spot, and we're going to have to – Ryan Young is going to play a role no matter what. If we get someone in or we don't, Ryan Young is going to play a major role in next year's success.
Without a doubt, and excited to see what kind of a role he can play in next year's success. Thrilled to have him coming back. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the numbers there on the screen. By the way, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like this video as well. But 68.5% shooting from the floor for Young. I mean, he just really was so efficient, and you needed that, right? Because we talked about Lively earlier in the week, and looking back at his year, he was just a main dunk guy, right? That's where he was getting a whole lot of his offense. And so to have those efficient scores on Duke's team this past season, I think was really important. And Young was one of those guys.
Yeah, and Young had the uncanny ability to get a shot blocker's timing off, with the way he moved his feet.
His post moves are great, man.
Yeah,
You really don't expect it. You don't expect it looking at him, but he gets it done.
He could get his shot off against anybody for the most part. And so that was really cool. And I do think, too, where he lacked in just raw athleticism, I think he made up for in his leadership and his knowledge of the game. You didn't feel bad. Now, I know there were certain games where you felt like, for instance, the Tennessee game, where you felt like, Lively needs to play every second of this game, right?
Right.
There were games that just weren't for Ryan Young, right, at the end of the day. The Carolina game, for that matter. Armando Bacot, probably not a good matchup for Ryan Young.
Right.
But there were plenty of other games where Ryan Young's 15 to 20 minutes that he played in a game were very important, and he was able to contribute at a high level.
We're big time, that's for sure. No doubt about that. So kudos to Ryan Young and the season that he had. I think our big takeaway here is we're fired up to have him back for another season. Yeah. Whatever transfer bigs could come in this freshman class, I think he's going to be a big brother figure for them like he was this season. And, man, we're fired up to get to another season of Ryan Young in Durham.
Wouldn't surprise me, JJ.
Yeah.
This might be a first. I don't know. Seth may have done this, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a team captain next year.
Yeah.
Because I think that position, at least historically,
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Historically at Duke has not necessarily been your most talented player. It's been the guy who leads that locker room, the guy who keeps everybody in the Duke culture and leads the Duke culture in a certain way. And so it would not surprise me at all if he was one of the captains next year.
You mentioned Seth Curry, and that kind of sets us up for how we'll wrap up today's conversation. But looking at the last decade plus or so, kind of the transfers for Duke basketball that have had a big impact on the program, and we'll have that conversation here in just a moment. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen here today, making us your first listen every day for that matter. Every dayers, make sure you check out tomorrow's show as well. We got to keep these end-of-year reviews going and also continue to keep you updated on what's going on with Duke in the transfer portal. A couple of bigs have entered recently. Duke has been connected with a few names, and we'll break all of that down on tomorrow's show. Make sure you check us out and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. After this show is over, make sure you go over and check out Locked On College Basketball. My good buddies Isaac Shade and Andy Patton are doing a remarkable job telling you everything you need to know about this college basketball offseason. They're getting you ready for the NBA draft coming up as well with a lot of the college prospects that are there. So don't miss that. It's Locked On College Basketball. It's also available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Final few moments here of today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. All right, so we talked about transfers today. We talked about Ryan Young and Jacob Grandison, and just a thought exercise for Duke fans out there who can add to our conversation here in the comments below on YouTube. What have been significant transfers to stand out for Duke in recent memory and that sort of thing, Josh? So I'll turn the floor over to you with some names that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned Seth Curry, and Seth, obviously Steph's brother and kind of still is. I mean, and that's just fair. I mean, this is an NBA podcast, but arguably one of the most incredible performances ever in that Game 7 against the Kings. But Seth played his first season at Liberty University, and I think averaged right at 20 points a game, and as a true freshman, and kind of realized he was ready for something bigger. And
led the entire country in freshman scorers that season.
Yeah. And then he comes into Duke and, I mean, really turns into that exactly what you would have thought. I mean, he shot the ball incredibly well. I'll never forget that he was the guy in the corner when the Austin Rivers shot the UNC shot and, calling for the ball in the corner there. And, probably most Duke fans would have been like, yeah, please get the ball to the corner to Seth.
No doubt.
But Seth, I mean, he stands out to me as I would say probably the most decorated and successful transfer. I think if you want to go second to that, you're looking at Rodney Hood. Those are two guys who came to Duke as transfers and then went to the league.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at it that way, Rodney Hood came in, man, smooth as silk, lefty, and, came in during a time when, he was definitely needed in that rotation. So those two guys, Curry and Rodney Hood, are the kind of the first two that jump off the plate for me.
No, for sure. I think that's fair to say. And obviously we're looking back to, the 2010s era or so. There were transfers prior to that, but just thinking in recent memory,
Yeah.
what it's kind of looked like. You look at Curry, 3 seasons playing for Duke, as opposed to just these one-year runs that we've had with a lot of people. His transfer season was also during a time where players had to sit out a full year without playing. That was the year that Duke won the national championship. So Curry was, in fact, a part of a national championship team, even though he wasn't able to play in any game, but he's practicing each and every day, and then had just 3 absolutely terrific seasons there for Duke. Rodney Hood, another name you mentioned, who started his career at Mississippi State, played 1 year there for the Bulldogs, and we only got 1 year of Rodney Hood at Duke in a season where he teamed up with Jabari Parker and was an excellent player for Duke and turned into a first-round pick. I think we wish we would have had a little bit more time with Rodney Hood there in Durham.
Yeah, it would have been nice, but man, that season, that was some incredible offensive performances between Rodney Hood and Jabari Parker. I mean, I'm not sure that Duke fans really appreciated that in the moment, like they should have. But Rodney has gone on and had a successful pro career, spent the majority of his pro career with the Portland Trailblazers, but has bounced around a little bit. And in fact, I think he might be out of the league right now, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, yeah.
I believe he is.
He had an Achilles injury that kind of set him off for some time. But the Blazers, the Jazz, the Cavs, he's been around the block a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, just a successful career. And once again, that's the way I put these. Why these two guys, in my opinion, are kind of in their own category, because they came to Duke, and then they went on to be pro players for many years. And Seth, obviously, still doing this thing and is not slowing down at all. You look back. I mean, you're talking about Rashawn McLeod way back in the day. He also went pro, played some with the Hawks and whatnot. But once again, we're not talking about that era per se. We're kind of talking in the 2010s. So I think these two guys stand out for sure.
Yeah. Last year's team in the Final Four run had Theo John, who comes over from Marquette. I think in so many ways, Duke's toughness a season ago was so beneficial for Paulo Banchero to be there. Theo John just finished up his first year in pro ball playing with the Capital City Go-Go, which is an awesome G League team name.
Yes,
they're for the Washington Wizards. But Theo John is a name that actually was able to play on the floor. I'll shout out some names here in a moment, but these are also guys that actually made a big impact on the floor for Duke.
I don't think there's been a transfer that won the fan base over as quickly as Theo John. I felt like everybody became Theo John fans within the first 2 weeks of the season. And he just had that toughness about him. I mean, honestly, his counting stats and stuff weren't that great, like his number, but man, there was just something about that guy. I want to take that guy with me. I want him on my team.
So tough.
Yeah. And he may lack some in some offensive areas for sure. And he's limited in what he can do. But man, if we rolled in a Theo John every 2 or 3 years in the transfer portal, I think Duke would sign up for that 10 times out of 10.
No doubt. Immediately barking at UNC fans, and he had the back and forth with Caleb Love throughout the season. I mean, it was just incredible, the toughness that Theo John was able to bring, and forever a part of the brotherhood, being on a Final Four team in Coach K's last season.
Yeah, and I think something that and you mentioned it earlier with Chris Collins, but I think it's something to look at with the Coach K coaching tree, because I mean, we're not going to talk about these guys, but we had Harvard. We had a Harvard transfer this past year from Tommy Amaker, and then the Theo John was a Chris Wojciechowski, no longer there, but was there, and he was his coach and recruited him and brought him in.
Yeah.
So I do think there's something to be said for that. I mean, as Duke guys are kind of connected in different ways throughout the country, now that the transfer portal is what it is, if you're a coach and you have a guy leaving,
it's an easy phone call for those coaches.
You can help him. Exactly. You can help him get to a place like Duke if he fits. Why not? And so I think that's something Duke fans can just keep their eyes on.
And in those coaches' hearts, like Collins, Amaker, Wojo, Chris Carrawell was there on Wojo's staff when Theo John was there. In their hearts, I think they're okay with kind of setting Duke up for success by sending.
Well, they're going to leave anyway.
Right.
They're leaving. So why not try to help them out and why not try to help your alma mater out, right?
So Theo John, a big-time contributor for Duke in the toughness category and just rebounding and everything that he was able to do a season ago on that Final Four team. You mentioned Cale Catchings from Harvard. Max Johns comes over, another Ivy League guy this year. Yep. Bates Jones was a scholarship player for Duke that came over from Davidson. Of course, Daniel Jones' younger brother. Patrick Tape, remember, transferred in and played for Duke from San Francisco here in recent memory. So, a couple of guys making the impact there for the Blue Devils, or went to San Francisco after Duke came over from blanking on where he came from. But,
who was it?
Patrick Tape.
Oh, man, I forget where
was it Columbia? From. I think it was.
It may have been.
Yeah, who knows?
May have been.
Shout out him, whatever he's up to.
I was about to say, in 3 years, he'll be the guy that's like, let's talk about grad transfers that we forgot.
I love that. Well, Josh, thanks for the time today, man. It's always great to see you.
Hey, man, great to see you too, JJ. Have a great week.
Go check out the Section 17 podcast, support their work. And thanks so much for watching Locked On Blue Devils here today, your one-stop shop for everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.